When we went into this process, I think we were educated about a lot of it, but I think we were also a little bit naive because we were not popular because we already had children. A lot of expectant mothers, the majority I would say, have a very specific family type that they're looking for. They're looking for a mom and a dad, heterosexual couple with no kids.
Your dream is to become a mom. My dream is to help you get there. I'm Rebecca Gruenspan, a single mom through domestic adoption and an adoption consultant for over a decade. I'll be your guide, along with other adoption professionals and members of the adoption constellation, walking you step by step down this beautiful and complex path of adopting your baby. When I was going through the adoption process, I had no idea what I was doing, what I needed to know, or more importantly, who to trust. Well, after helping hundreds and hundreds of families grow through the beauty and complexity of adoption, I've learned more than a thing or two, and let me tell you, it's not always rainbows and butterflies. This isn't just another podcast sharing adoption stories, but it's for you if you're genuinely committed to diving in with an open heart, eager to learn everything there is to know about adopting a baby so that you can show up for yourself and your child in the best way possible. This podcast is for you if you're ready to put your newfound knowledge into action. Adoption isn't for the weak of heart, and it certainly isn't done when your baby gets placed in your arms. If that's what you think, I'm afraid you're living in La La Land. My promise to you is to keep it real if you promise to keep digging. We'll acknowledge the hard, and we'll also celebrate the joy that is adoption. You ready? Let's do this. Welcome back to the Adoption Roadmap Podcast, where each episode shines a light on the journey to family through adoption. I'm your host, Rebecca Gruenspan. I have a question for you. Have you ever felt that deep call to grow your family, yet found every planned path blocked by unexpected turns? Today, we're diving into a story that echoes the resilience and hope many of you share. Joining us is Whitney Michael, a Texan with a degree in human biology and a master's in public health, and a passionate advocate for both foster care and adoption. Whitney brings a unique perspective to our discussion and will share about her transition from private adoption to foster to adopt. Whitney's story is not just about the challenges, but also about the incredible joy and hope found in the process. She's a wife, a mama, both through biology and foster care, and a lover of iced tea and good books. So whether you're sipping on a glass of iced tea or tuning in during your commute, stay with us as we unpack a journey of patience, persistence, and love with Whitney Michael. Whitney, welcome to the show. Let's dive right in. And I would love for you to start by telling us what initially drew you and your family to consider adoption.
So when my husband and I were engaged, we started talking about what we wanted our family to look like. And we both have adoption in our family histories. And so it was just always something that we discussed. Our mantra kind of this whole entire time has been that it's a when discussion and not an if discussion. So it was just something that was really important to both of us mutually. And I think that like as individuals, and then when we came together as a couple, it was just something that we sort of agreed on. We knew that we weren't going to be able to do it right away. When we first got married, we wanted to make sure we were more, financially stable and ready for children before. And we initially thought we might have to start a lot earlier than we did. We had some infertility issues. I had several miscarriages. I'm sure a lot of people listening can probably relate to that.
I'm sure.
And after many difficult years and 3 losses and 2 very, very difficult pregnancies, we were blessed to have our 2 bio babies.
Beautiful redheads.
Yes, they're both redheads. Mia will be 9 in just a couple of weeks.
Okay.
And Nate is 5. And they are wonderful. But after Nate was born, I think that's when we kind of were like, okay, we're ready for this now. We're ready for this next step. we always knew we wanted more children.
Mm-hmm.
And given the difficulty that we had conceiving and then staying pregnant and then difficult pregnancies, I was like, I'm ready, the baby making factory is shut down and I'm ready to move on to the next chapter. So that's kind of how we arrived at our timing for when we were ready.
So did you always know that you wanted to start with private infant adoption, and is that where your head was at completely, or were you also open at that time to foster?
At that time, we were strictly focused on private adoption.
Okay. So I'm going to get back to that, but I'm wondering what the key factors were that led to your decision to switch from private adoption to foster to adopt.
It was primarily monetary.
Okay.
We had 2 matches that didn't pan out. And the second match, we were matched for 4 months, and we had what I thought was really, really great communication. We were talking all the time, texting with updates and pictures, and I thought it was really good. It was really healthy, and we were all set to have this beautiful open adoption, and ultimately they decided to parent, which of course everyone knows in the adoption world is a risk. It's a risk that you take as a hopeful adoptive parent. But we did lose a substantial amount of money. We had set aside, so much. And another thing that kind of threw us off is during the time that we were trying to adopt, the cost skyrocketed. And so what we had initially set aside and what everybody told us would be enough was no longer enough.
So can you talk, if you're comfortable, tell me a little bit about when you started, what were you hearing was the range? And if you feel comfortable sharing how much you lost, I want
Sure.
people to understand what we're talking about here, because it is substantial.
When we first started, we were told anywhere from $35,000 to $50,000 was what we should expect,
which is already such a wide range.
Yes, and we were, we kind of knew that there were different factors that could impact what the total cost ended up being, and we're seeing several opportunities that were like approaching $70,000+, and we were just like soup to nuts, totally everything $70,000, from the agency fees and lawyer fees and medical care, and it made it difficult to say yes to situations because we didn't want to say yes to something that we knew we couldn't afford.
Yeah.
And we applied for grants. We didn't get any. It was a hard process, and I think that the decision to step away was an extremely difficult decision. We were also just sort of emotionally not in a good place. After that second match fell through, it almost kind of felt like it's a different kind of loss, but it felt like the loss of another baby in a way. Yeah. Just because we had gotten so close, and we were basically ghosted. She cut off communication with us, with her attorney, our attorney. She wasn't speaking to anyone. And so we, at that point, we decided our home study was actually expiring anyway. And we were just like, we're financially tapped out. We're emotionally tapped out. We decided to take a few months to just focus on trying to figure out how we were going to rebuild our savings and our family. And so that's kind of how we moved away from private adoption. So it was primarily, money related, but it also had to do with just our emotional states. We weren't in a healthy headspace.
That makes a lot of sense. How much did you end up losing? And did you lose in both situations? You said you were matched and it fell through twice.
The first match, we actually hadn't lost any money.
Okay.
It was a situation where she was due very soon.
Okay.
And We were getting everything up. I had booked a flight already to go out there, and everything. We were setting everything up for the money transfer and everything. And a couple of days before I was set to go out there, we got a phone call that she had just up and left the agency. She was with an agency that kind of provided everything, housing, medical care. It was all kind of in-house. And they're like, we don't know. She just packed up her stuff and left. It happened prior to any money being moved.
Okay.
So for that particular situation, we didn't actually lose any money. The second match, where we were matched for 4.5 months, we lost about $25,000 in total. Yeah, it was hard.
All right. Can we just stop there for a second?
Sure.
That's an extreme, like I always say, and I know that financially, that's one of the things that holds a lot of people back. And I always talk about how I don't care if you're a multimillionaire or if you make $30,000 a year. Nobody has that kind of money to just flush down the toilet and say, bye-bye, $20,000.
It was very hard. And that was when we went back and looked at everything, like including the home study and all the other fees that we had paid, the application fees, it ended up being even more than that. So we were like, okay, well, even if we wanted to continue with this journey right now, we don't have the finances to do that. We're not, we still have bills to pay and 2 other children to support. But yes, it's a lot of money, and it in a lot of ways, I think it can make a lot of people sick to their stomach when they hear that. Like, yeah, okay, $25,000 is gone. And I'm never going to get it back.
And thank you for sharing that, because I mean, it makes me sick to my stomach, working with hopeful adoptive parents. Number one, presenting situations where I know what the financial risk is, and knowing what the families will go through if they lose this kind of money. And many do. I think fall throughs happen about 25% of the time, close to it, give or take a little bit, which is a lot. And I think agencies and attorneys and people who are facilitating matches get so used to these numbers where it doesn't feel like anything to them anymore.
Yeah. And there are a lot of times that we felt, for lack of a better word, icky about the whole thing. Like, it was feeling like we want to grow our family, but to a lot of the people on the adoption side, this is a business.
Mm-hmm.
And the attorney that we had was very, very supportive and wonderful, but she's still not going to say, oh, well, I'll give you all the money back that you spent. That's not realistic.
Right. And mostly because they can't, right?
Right. And it's, most of that had gone to supporting her while she was pregnant. And yeah, it was hard. It was really hard. And to struggle with that financial loss as well as the emotional loss at the same time was, I think we just sort of recognized in ourselves, like, we need some time. We need a breather. We need to step away from this for a little while and reassess everything.
Yeah.
So
I think this is a really good place to talk a little bit about the harsh realities of what you are committing to when you match during an adoption. And it's kind of what you just said. What you are committing to is a woman comes forward and makes an adoption plan because she thinks that is something that might be the best for her baby. And she believes that this is a plan that makes sense for her at the time that she makes the plan. There is no commitment involved at all. And then she chooses a family. And as a hopeful adoptive family, you say, yes, this feels like a great match. I am committed to supporting you throughout the rest of your pregnancy, no matter what you choose at the end.
Yes. I think it's hard. It's hard.
It's very hard. And that is adoption. And I don't think a lot of people understand it in that way. And I think there's still a lot of people who think that when they match, that's it. Like, they're going to become a parent. And I'm all for positive thinking and putting it out into the universe and believing that it will be the best for everybody involved. And that's not exactly it's not a commitment.
Yeah. It
It's a
was hard.
plan.
It was hard for me. I had a lot of personal growth during this whole process just because I'm not a very patient person. I'm very type A. And
I think a lot of people are that go through adoption.
When we went into this process, I think we were educated about a lot of it, but I think we were also a little bit naive because we were not popular because we already had children. A lot of expectant mothers, the majority, I would say, have a very specific family type that they're looking for. They're looking for a mom and a dad, heterosexual couple with no kids. And so I think that anyone else who's kind of outside that, you know, families with children already, single moms, gay, lesbian couples, it's more, I feel like there should be more, I don't know, training support, like, hey, this is the reality of what you're trying to do. And yes, hopefully the end result for you will be a beautiful new family, but it's also going to be really hard. And you're going to get turned away a lot. And it's not fair that that's the case, but it's true.
And I don't even know if fair is the right word or not there.
Yeah.
It's a reality, right? Because
it is a reality.
I think a statistic I heard was that there are 10 hopeful parents for every woman who follows through with an adoption plan.
Yes.
And so with those statistics alone, you are going to hear way more no's than yeses. And for everybody, yes, it's probably statistically true that the majority of people who are successfully adopting are couples with, probably white couples with no children.
Yes.
And there's a lot of adoptions that happen outside of all of that. And there are still plenty of women who are looking for something other than that. Some people want automatic siblings for their kids. In fact, I just had a situation where it was, do you have another child? And if not, are you like committed to adopting again? So you never know what somebody's going to look for. I never want to discourage somebody outside of that, but probably statistically that's right. I haven't looked at that piece of it.
And we did, the situation that we were matched for 4 months, it was kind of a unicorn situation like that because they specifically wanted a family that already had children. And they were actually looking for a family that had more than one child.
Oh, interesting.
And I'm not sure of the reasoning behind that. I speculate it was because they already had children. But we were like, that's amazing that you know, it just felt really right. It finally felt like all the pieces were coming together for us. Like they want exactly what we are. And so I think that was another thing that made it really, really hard was that,
for sure,
you know, ultimately at the end of the day, they chose to parent and we wish the best for them, of course, but it was challenging. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about the emotions that you invested in it. Like, were you full out, here's my heart? Did you feel like you had to protect yourself? Like, how was that interaction during that time?
I think I'm kind of a more closed off person in general. It was hard for me to really open up at first, but also I've kind of learned through the adoption process, for those who have already gone through it, everything is out there. You know, everything is out there already. You know, they look at your profile book and they get a little bit of an idea of you, and the home study people know everything about you. And so I kind of got to a place where, you know, the longer we were matched, the more I was kind of like opening up, and I was still hesitant. And in terms of like, we were very reserved with who we chose to tell that we were even matched. We told our close friends and family, of course, because they knew what we were going through. But I didn't just go up to random people in the grocery store. and be like, hey, we're going to be bringing a baby home in a couple months, because I didn't know that for sure.
Right.
And so that was definitely a challenging piece for me. My husband is more extroverted than I am, so I think it was easier for him, but it was hard for me. And the mama that we were matched with, she was very open. Like, she was very open and honest with us, and I
Hmm.
I felt like, if she's trusting me with this information, I feel like I should, you know, and I would always tell her, if there's anything you want to know, please ask. I'm happy to share that with you. Um, but I just don't always know what kind of information you want. And so she was pretty good about asking me questions when she wanted to know something specific. But yeah, that was a hard for me, and I feel like for introverted people in general, it's challenging to put yourself out there.
Yeah, for sure. So you talked a little bit about the challenges that you faced during private adoption. Let's go to foster care. What are some of those challenges that you've been facing? I know you're still in it, right? You're
Yeah.
fostering a child now, but you're still in the
Yes.
process. Okay.
Yeah. So the licensing process took us about 7 months.
Okay.
Um, because there's a lot more involved to get licensed for foster care than if you're choosing to do a private adoption. And what was the most interesting to me, I think, is when you're pursuing private adoption, the first thing you do is a home study, right? That's kind of like the bread and butter. It's the first thing you do. It's the very last thing you do for foster care. It's the
Really?
very
Tell us about it.
it's the very last thing before you get your license. So every state is different, but in Texas, just kind of a broad overview is you apply, and some regions are privatized. They
Hmm.
use agencies. Other regions in Texas are not, and they just go strictly through CPS. But our area is privatized. So we went through and we looked at agencies. Kind of feel like RG set us up pretty good for vetting that, because we knew exactly what kind of questions we wanted to ask. We wanted to make sure that we chose an agency that was open to families adopting, because not all foster care agencies are.
Okay.
And we were very honest with them. We're like, look, our ultimate goal is adoption. We understand that that's not the primary goal of foster care, but that is our end goal. And luckily, we found an agency that was wonderfully supportive of that, and they have many families who have gone on to adopt through foster care. So you do the background checks, the fingerprinting, all of that has to get run again. And then
Hmm.
you officially apply for the agency. And then once you get accepted, you start your training. And in Texas, at least, it's about 50 hours of training. And there's different trainings that you have to do. Um, and then after your training's done, you get all your home inspections, and then you have your home study, and then you're licensed.
Wow. Okay.
So it
That's
took a because we have, two other children, and thankfully, I mean, silver lining to COVID is now it's all online. So
yes.
all of our training classes were through Zoom. But it was a lot. It was a lot, made for a lot of very busy evening. The classes are all evenings and weekends, and so um, that's why it took us so long to get through everything, because it wasn't just like we can sit down and do 50 hours in 2 days. No, that wasn't realistic.
Yeah.
And you're also only allowed to do a certain number of training hours per day,
Oh, okay.
which is another
Okay.
thing that I found interesting. So you had to kind of spread them out. But I feel
So,
like if other people were pursuing foster care, they could probably get licensed faster. Um, but yeah, for us, it was about 7 months.
okay. So besides that long process to get licensed,
Yeah.
what are some of the other challenges that you face? I feel like, yeah. And how long did it take for you to get a placement, and how
Yeah.
many have you
So
had?
the primary challenge, I feel like for me personally, I'm sure it's different for everyone, is adoption is trauma, foster care is even more so.
Hmm.
And I think we had an interesting perspective going in, already knowing that whatever child that comes into our home, even if it's from birth, there's going to be trauma. And we had to take several training classes just focused on parenting children with trauma. which is honestly something I think would be excellent for adoptive parents too. I would highly recommend it. So just and being able to, in some ways, you want to be mad, you want to be angry that this is happening to these children, but on the other side of it, you also have to have compassion, because you don't know what their families are going through. You don't know the struggles. You get very little information a lot of times. Sometimes you don't even get any. And so I think the emotional aspect of it, and also just sort of reorienting my brain to, okay, the child that comes into your home may not stay there forever, and you don't know how long they're going to be there. And I'm not good with uncertainty. And so that has been really, really challenging for me. In terms of how long it took us to get a placement, we just got our license in January.
Okay.
Right
now, just for context, we're in May of 2024, and you're talking about January of 2024. And when did you make the switch over to, when did you start?
We officially started training at the very end of June 2023. Okay. And then we got our license. I think our license date was like January 10th of 2024. We got our first call the very next day.
Wow.
But how it works, at least in privatized regions, just a quick broad overview, is they get what's called a request for placement from CPS for whatever reason. And that request for placement gets broadcasted to all of the agencies in that region. And this is after they've already exhausted like family or anyone else that could step in to help. And they get sent to all the agencies, and the agencies will go through and pick families that meets their age criteria, like all the things, checking all the boxes. And then they'll call you. And you can either say yes or no. There's really no pressure either way. You don't have to. That was one thing that was kind of easier about foster care than adoption, is you didn't have to feel guilty about saying no. And it doesn't move you to the bottom of the stack or anything like that.
Okay.
They're just like, okay, and they move on and call the next set of parents. But our first call, so we had 4 calls before we got the call for our current placement. And 2 of them we said no to, and 2 of them another family was chosen.
Okay.
And we got him at the end of February, so it was about 5 or 6 weeks after we got licensed. That's when he came into our home.
Beautiful. How's that going?
It's good. He's 5 months old, and he's very, very sweet.
Oh.
And he is so sweet, and our kids just, they love him. They're obsessed with him.
Is that common to get a baby? I thought it wasn't. Before we go on, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. We still have so much to talk about. The Adoption Roadmap podcast is sponsored by the Adoption Roadmap Academy, the only online program of its kind for hopeful adoptive parents like you who want step-by-step guidance, preparing for your home study, creating a compelling adoption profile book, choosing the right agencies, and more so that you can bring your baby home sooner. As an adoption consultant and adoptive mom who's been where you are, I'm going to guide you step-by-step through everything you need to know about the domestic infant adoption journey from home study to finalization. And the great part is you get to do it at your own pace with a supportive community behind you. The Adoption Roadmap Academy is a step-by-step guide to domestic infant adoption for hopeful individuals and families who are sick and tired of waiting forever. It's the first and only self-paced adoption consultant-led program that shows you exactly how to navigate the domestic adoption process from home study to finalization. With our proven 4-step adoption roadmap model, you're going to be able to save time you can't make up, hours and weeks and even months of tedious legwork and research are done for you. You're going to be able to go at your own pace. No matter what else is going on in life, nobody's going to be breathing down your throat. You are going to be able to gain and keep momentum because everything is going to be spoon-fed for you in exactly the way you need. You are going to possibly even save money by knowing how to vet situations and working with the right agencies. It could save you a lot of heartache. You are going to be able to access this course anytime, anywhere, and get expert guidance and support, not only by me, but also by an amazing community who know exactly what you are walking through. Here's what you can expect inside. You'll be getting streaming videos, worksheets, bonus resources, an adoption profile creation, agency contacts, live streams to connect with other people, and unending education, all using our 4-step proprietary adoption roadmap model. Plus, you'll be receiving a bonus mindset step that I highly recommend for everyone. So if you're interested in starting your adoption journey and ready to fast forward and simplify your domestic adoption process, please email the word academy to support@rgadoptionconsulting.com today, and we'll get you started. Is that common to get a baby?
Yeah. I mean,
They need pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, our parameters were 0 to 3.
Okay.
In order to get licensed for medical need, it's a whole other level, and so we did not do that. So we were looking for 0 to 3 with no medical needs, and there are several reasons why we chose that, but that just ultimately ended up being the best for our family. And we didn't get him fresh out of the hospital. He was almost 3 months old. But yeah, I mean, I would say the one thing I would add as a caveat is I feel like babies are a lot more common as part of sibling groups.
Yeah.
It's not often that you get just one baby, but it does happen.
Do you have any regrets about starting with private infant adoption, and or do you think it prepared you for this route?
A really tough question. I think it definitely gave us a unique perspective, and our caseworker has even told us that, like, you seem uniquely prepared for this. But I think now that we're in the foster care world, I'm having a lot of guilt about, like, why didn't we do this sooner? Why didn't we start with this? And we had people, even when we were in the private adoption sphere, was like, well, why don't you just do foster care? Why don't you just adopt from foster care? And I'm like, well, it's not that simple. Like, foster care does not guarantee an adoption. And I think at the time we were more focused on nothing in adoption is guaranteed, but we were focused on the guarantee of we will come home with a baby and the baby will stay in our home.
Yeah.
And
there's also never a just adopt anything.
Mm-hmm.
As we've been hearing, it's not that simple.
It's not either avenue, and it's also made me a lot less judgmental, I feel like, because either avenue you go down, you don't know a family's reasoning for choosing adoption. You don't know a family's reasoning for choosing foster care. We encountered another adoptive family when we were in that world of, they specifically did not want to do foster care because the mom had been in foster care and she had a lot of trauma from foster care, and she didn't want to reintroduce her own trauma by diving back into that world. And so, it's, people can be very judgmental about it, but ultimately, at the end of the day, I think you have to do whatever you feel is best for you and your family. And, ultimately, foster care was our goal for the future. We just kind of expedited our plan a little bit. I don't want it to seem like it was a fallback for us, because that was not the case.
I love how you brought up the fact that it's made you more compassionate and less judgmental, maybe. I think that's a really important point for a lot of people to hear. We don't know, and we'll probably never know or be able to understand the shoes that a birth mom or a mother whose child is placed in foster care, in your sense, the shoes that they stand in. And all we can do is try to have compassion for them and be there to help them pick up the pieces and be there to support however they are looking for that support.
Yeah. And it's, you know, we're very careful with the language that we use, especially with our kids. Like if we're talking about doing something in the future and they ask about the baby, I'll say, well, if he's still with us, of course he'll be coming with us. Or if he's still with us, of course he'll be doing that with us. And that was another very challenging piece is explaining foster care to our kids in an age appropriate way.
Talk to me about that. And even like, how did that differ from when you talked to them when you were matched, or did they even know? Or it's a different conversation for sure, but kind of is kind of not.
Yes. There are a lot of similarities.
Yeah.
They did know that we were matched. Our daughter has a much better understanding than our son does, just because she's older. And they were both very sad when the match fell through. You know, they thought they were getting another sibling, and ultimately, even though we had told them, you know, this is not a for sure thing. Mm-hmm. This isn't like mommy has a baby in her belly. It's not like that. But the best way that we have been able to explain foster care to them is we're caring for kids whose parents, for whatever reason, we don't know the reason, we don't always know the reason, they can't take care of them right now. Mm-hmm. I'm just being very careful of our language of saying things like right now and for this time.
Do they teach you that, or is that something you learned through the process?
They kind of talk about that in some of the trainings, but it's more the trainings aren't necessarily geared towards people who already have kids, even though they're a lot more open to that in foster care than in the adoption world, I think, because we have faced a lot less judgment, I'll put it that way. Ultimately, I think that was a helpful way to explain it. And we've also joined several Facebook groups that have been really good about like offering suggestions. And we bought a couple of books for them, but we also, you know, make sure to tell them that during this time, when he's in our home, he's part of our family. He has parents that can't care for him right now, but he's part of our family right now. Like, they don't use the term foster brother, and we don't use the term foster son. He's our son for now, and he's their brother for now. And I said, and even if when he leaves us, he will always be a part of our family. And I think I think they're doing about as well as I could have ever hoped for with the whole situation, especially our daughter. She's handling it in a very mature way. I think our son has a little bit less of an understanding of like, this isn't a permanent situation, but we're very, very careful with our language.
Before we go on, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. We still have so much to talk about. Hey there, Adoption Roadmap fam. Are you ready to take the next step on your journey to parenthood? If so, head over to our website and take our quiz. It's called, Are You Ready to Adopt? It's not just about testing your knowledge. It's about making sure you're emotionally and practically prepared for the beautiful, complex journey of adoption. Let's make your dream of parenthood a reality. Go to rgadoptionconsulting.com and take the Are You Ready to Adopt quiz today. That's rgadoptionconsulting.com. The quiz is free, and it will let you know where you are in the process and if you're ready to jump into your adoption journey. Well, and you're not new to adoption. I know that you have connections to adoption in your extended family, I think. So tell me about those, and did those experiences that you've had in your life give you insight or influence your expectations in any way?
Absolutely. Our primary connection to that is that Jason, my husband, his aunt was adopted at birth.
Okay.
And she, you know, back in the day, adoptions were done very differently.
Very.
and she didn't connect with her birth mother until she was an adult. And, I think it was my husband's family is very, very close knit. And I, she expressed things about sometimes she felt like an outsider. She didn't look like everybody else. And I think it was very healing for her to connect with her birth mom and her birth sister when she got older. And so having her saying that was really like pressing on me, especially like it's really important to maintain that birth family connection.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't ever want any child to feel like, of course you're part of our family, but you also come from another family, and that family is very important too. And so I think that was the primary. And just my family on the other side of things, my grandpa adopted 2 of my aunts as a step-parent adoption. So it wasn't quite the same thing, but I have a very blended family. And so just the puzzle piece from my side came from family is more than just people that you have a blood relationship with. It can be so much more than that.
Yeah.
And, our hope when we were matched for private adoption was that the baby's birth parents would become part of our family as well. And so I think that's kind of where just reaffirming for us the importance of the birth family connection.
It's in your blood. Like the language, what does it mean? What did other people in our family feel like when they went through this? How can we approach it? I love that. And I love the fact that, most people don't have family members who are also part of your adoption community, because most of our families don't get it. Right. So I know that they had to have been not only were they a big influence, but also a big support. And I think that support piece is so important in every adoption. And I don't know,
Absolutely.
What role has community played in your adoption and foster care process?
We would not have been able to sustain ourselves in either world without our support system. We're very, very lucky. Both sets of grandparents live very close, and everyone has always been, our friends are wonderfully supportive. And, we still get a lot of questions sometimes, like, why are you doing this? I don't understand your desire to do this. I don't understand why you're doing this. Even from our family members, sometimes we still get that. But at the end of the day, they ultimately support us and the way that we choose to grow our family. And I think it's been very educational for them as well to walk through this, especially from my side of the family where there's not as much knowledge about adoption, to kind of walk through this process with us and learn at the same time. And at one point, I kind of had to take a step back and realize that this is new for them as well. And that's why they're asking questions, and that's why they're struggling, is because they want us to be whole and happy. And they, not everybody gets the call to adopt. It's not something that everybody goes through.
Right.
And so, but I think it's been very helpful for them to learn alongside with us at the same time also.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you also mentioned Facebook groups that you were part of.
Yes.
And I always tell people, when you're going through the adoption process, Facebook is your friend, because there is so much information. It could be for friend or foe, really. I mean, you got to take it with a grain of salt and find your right communities, because it can also be really volatile. But tell me about that, and has that piece of it been important to you to find other families online?
Absolutely. Yes, 100%. Connected with another family, another RG family, when we were going through the process, that also lives in Texas. And I love watching their little girl grow up. It's amazing. And I don't remember how I originally found this foster care group that I'm on Facebook, but it's specific for Texas. And I think somebody might have told me about it. And it's been incredibly helpful. Like you can just go on and ask questions in a no judgment way. And like there was just recently a situation where I was like, I don't know how to handle this. Like going on and just finding other people who are like, oh yeah, I've been there. That totally happens, and it's totally okay that you feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been monumental. I mean, I can't even express how important that aspect of it has been for me personally. I'm more the social media guru in our house. Jason could he doesn't care about social media, but I'll always be like, "Oh, I heard this on the Facebook group, or somebody in the Facebook group suggested this." And then we also connected with the foster closet, which is amazing. They basically provide things for foster families that you need, and it's like a giant exchange of like I got a baby Brezza and a bottle sterilized, like completely free that other foster families used, and then they pass it on. So it's been awesome. It really has been.
That's so great. And I know you mentioned RG a couple times, and for our listeners, that's RG Adoption Consulting. That's the company I run, and Whitney is still part of our community, valuable part of our community. You're often giving advice and giving suggestions to other families. So I really appreciate that you mentioned that, and mentioning connecting with other families and all of these different ways. I think this is not a commercial for Facebook, although if Facebook would like to sponsor this,
they
can.
Sponsor us. That would be great. No,
but Facebook is great for communities and to find other people like you who are going through similar things, because otherwise it can feel very lonely.
It's a very isolating process. Like even if you know people that have been through it, it's still a very isolating process. And I think being able to walk alongside other people who are like, I'm going through the same thing. I'm struggling with the same thing. I'm having the same feelings you are. And in that no judgment way has been, so I would say to anyone who becomes a new client of yours, the first thing I would absolutely do is join the Facebook group.
Yeah.
Just because it's been so helpful.
It's interesting, at the end of the process, we ask a lot, what was your biggest aha moment, or what was something you were surprised by? And we often get, I was surprised by how much the community actually meant to me. I didn't go in thinking I needed it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, especially for families that, for whatever reason, have had trouble growing their family.
Right, which is almost all of them.
Yeah, exactly. But you kind of get into this whole, oh, I'm a strong, independent person. I can do this by myself. I don't need anybody else to help me. And for the first 6 months that we were in private adoption, after we got our home study the first time, we were walking it alone. We had no idea what we were doing. And I finally had someone say, have you ever thought about hiring a consultant? And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. Like, I didn't even know that was something that existed. And they're like, just Google adoption consultants and you'll figure it out. And that's how we found you. And I was like, why didn't we do this at the very beginning? Like the very beginning, because then we would have had somebody like holding our hand and kind of guiding us along, people who have been there. It's invaluable. It really is. And I wish, my only regret is that we didn't do it sooner.
Yeah. I mean, I feel the same way. I used a consultant too, which is why I even started the business, because I felt the exact same way. I would tell people who came to me saying, what did you do? And I'd tell them, I'll help you, but only if you work with my consultant, because I'm not letting you do this alone. Mm-hmm. And then slowly continued to support them on the back end, and then started my own business. What advice would you give to others who are considering both private adoption and foster to adopt?
I can't speak to that specifically because we're no longer pursuing both simultaneously, but just know that they're two very, very different processes. And you need to, if you're kind of trying to decide between the two, you need to really sit down and you need to look at all the puzzle pieces, because either way, it's a journey. It's a challenging walk that you're going to face. Mm-hmm. But you need to, ask yourself what you're willing to handle emotionally, financially, before you make that call. And like I said, at the end of the day, everyone has their own opinions and reasons for choosing what they do. But they're both very rewarding. I can say that. But they were both very hard too.
Yeah.
And we're still walking this foster care journey, so we're still very new to this process. So we're still learning a lot about it every single day. I mean, if you're not good with paperwork, I would say don't go the foster care route, because it's our little guy, his binder is,
Holy cow, even worse than the home study paperwork for
yeah.
private?
I mean, everything has to be documented. Everything.
Oh, wow.
And because this child is in your care, but they're not in your custody.
Right.
So, and all the babysitters have to be vetted. They have to go through background checks. Like, we can't just let anybody watch him.
Oh, interesting.
And so there's a lot, and there's every day I feel like we're learning something new, and okay, I didn't know that. Or they just added an extra training, and they're like, oh, you got to do this training now. Okay, well, pile it on. So you really do have to ask yourself, what you're willing to do.
What has this journey thus far, because you're still in it, taught you about yourself? And has it changed your perspective on family and parenting?
Absolutely. And in terms of what it's taught me about myself, is that I am able and capable of handling more than I thought I could.
Amen.
And yeah, I think a lot of people probably go through that, and they're like, I didn't ever think I would come out the other side of the tunnel. And because when you're in it, it's so hard. And also patience. I'm not a patient person. I'm still working on that every day, but you have to be, and you have to learn how to
relate.
be. Yes. And you have to learn how to be flexible. And I think it's made me a lot more compassionate and understanding. And in terms of changing my role on parenting, I think all the classes that we took for foster care were actually really helpful about that, because all the trauma training, and it was good to have, even for me, for having been a parent for 8 years at the time when we were doing this. Like, I was still like, oh, okay. Like, it would suggest a way of going about, because the way you discipline foster children has to be a little bit different, just because they come from trauma. And so I would read something and I'd be like, oh, I kind of do that with my kids. Maybe I should change the way that I say that I talk about that I approach that situation. And I think if anything, it's helped me to be a better mom.
That's beautiful.
I mean, I'm not perfect. I'm still learning every single day in both my parenting and my foster parenting journey. But and with adoption too, like it teaches you compassion and patience. You have to be very patient. And yeah, that's the main thing, I think.
I love it. I think everybody could use a dose of that, right?
No,
Patience.
yes. And I'm not trying to say that it was an easy path for me. Like I said, I'm still walking it every day, because that's not how I'm predisposed.
Yeah.
And also learning to relinquish control. Like, you're not in control of this situation. Like, you don't have control over this. You can choose ways that you can influence it, that you can help, that you can support, but you can't. There's nothing you can't. Ultimately, at the end of the day, whatever's going to happen, you can't change that.
One of the things I say often to families as they're going through this process is, as soon as you can figure out how to relinquish control, that's when the magic happens.
Yeah. And also, I always tell people that same thing, but also let me know when you figure it out, because I'm still struggling with it. Like, it's hard every single day, but
sure.
I think that's how it's made me better, is it's forced me to kind of take a step outside of myself and be like, okay, well, that's not going to happen. So let's just see how we can get through this and move on to the next thing.
This whole conversation has been so eye-opening, and I appreciate you being so raw and vulnerable, especially because we have learned that you're not always such an open person, but that this journey has opened you up a lot. I like to end all of these conversations that I am so privileged to have with some rapid fire questions. So the first one is, who is a person or organization that has been a positive influence on your journey, your adoption journey, or your foster care journey? I'd love to shout them out.
Oh, goodness. Well, I'd love to give a shout out to our foster care agency, A World for Children.
Please.
In Texas, they are wonderful, and everybody that we've encountered there has been magical. Just social workers in general, give them grace because they're amazing people. They do amazing work, and they don't get paid enough to do it.
Amen. What does your morning routine look like?
Well, anymore, I get up, I get my daughter ready, get her to school, and then usually by the time I'm done taking her to school, the baby's waking up, so I feed the baby. And so full-time in my house right now, I have the baby and my 5-year-old son, and then my daughter goes to school during the day, but she's only got like 3 more weeks left. And almost every night we have some kind of activity for our kids. Soccer, karate, dance, something. I'm sure you know.
I only have one.
But he still does things, though.
Yes, he does.
But my morning routine is get up, get her to school, make breakfast, feed the baby, and kind of get my son started on his... I'm kind of like homeschooling him right now, so getting him started on that process, and can't do anything without coffee. Specifically iced coffee, so.
What's a great book you recently read?
I just read a book. I'm in a book club. So the book that we read last month was called In Her Head, and it was a very interesting... It was written by a doctor who is also like a medical historian. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of just how women's medicine has developed over the centuries and how it's gotten to a place... One thing that was like really powerful for me was she's an oncologist, the doctor who wrote it. And she was saying that she would go into patients' bedsides as they were, very sick or dying, and they would apologize. These women would apologize for sweating on her or for not having their makeup done. Mm-hmm. And it was just kind of a deep dive into why a lot of women don't feel empowered to stand up for themselves when it comes to their health and their medical care. And it was really cool. So, and the bio nerd in me was just totally enjoying that.
I love it.
It was really good. And I also just reread Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. It's a YA novel, but it's about OCD. The movie actually just came out today on Max.
Oh.
So I love my YA novels. I'll be a fan forever.
What's YA?
Young adult, sorry. Young adult. So when you think of like things like The Hunger Games and Harry Potter and that genre. So that was really cool that was a really cool, just sort of refreshing myself before the movie came out also.
Awesome. What's one of your biggest fears when it comes to your children?
That I think the same fear that every parent has, that I'll fail them in some way, that there'll be something that I don't teach them that they end up needing. And that there are still days where I'm like, I'm not enough. And I think that's probably my biggest fear.
What's one of your greatest dreams for your children?
That they grow up to be kind people who have a strong work ethic, and that they love the people around them, their team, their family, their friends.
What are 3 words that describe adoption?
Rewarding, challenging, beautiful.
Whitney Michael, thank you so much for being on our podcast today, and I hope you'll tune in next time to the Adoption Roadmap podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. If you did, I have a few favors to ask of you. First, please hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And while you're at it, I'd love to hear your takeaways. Please write a review and let me know what you liked. And if you have a question or a suggestion on what you'd like to hear, I'd love to hear that too. Please shoot me an email at support@rgadoptionconsulting.com and let me know what you'd like to hear about. And if you have a question, I may just answer it online. Thanks again for listening. Tune in every Wednesday and Friday morning for a brand new episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. Until next time, bye-bye.